Vijayanthi Shankar. I'm a vice president in an organization called Educational Initiatives. So Educational Initiatives is an educational research and assessment organization where we focus on ensuring that children everywhere learn with understanding. So I've been part of this group ever since our company started in 2001, and I do the large-scale assessment piece in basically building the division where we do assessments across different school systems, more so with governments and working with funding agencies and so on. So figuring out and ensuring that the methodology and the processes and the idea of large-scale assessment itself is up to a rigorous scientific standard is something for India. I've sort of pioneered this from the last 10 years. So my experience has been largely with how children are learning in the different school systems.
In the first session, basically we would share our approach or more so on experiences in terms of how, what are the issues that happens when you design large-scale assessments, or how it's getting perceived and what could be the misconceptions related to that and so on. I would just share the experiences and the perspectives in relation to building large-scale assessments. So this is broadly the different points I'll be touching upon. The experience in terms of large-scale assessments in EI, I would sort of broadly classify into three main types. One I could say is our cross-sectional studies. So these are studies which are done at a point, snapshot, done horizontally across different states or districts and so on. So for example, the student learning study was done across 20 states of India. It covered about 48 districts and 1.6 lakh kids in government schools. This is actually being commended in the 12th and 13th and 14th Saraswati Abhiyan Joint Review Mission. So the second, the similar study last year, we saw the quality education study. So there would be studies like this, even the previous India Today supported, the study which got released in India Today magazine and so on. So these are what I would call as the cross-sectional studies. The second type I would say are the longitudinal studies, where you are looking at a system and a reform continuously across the years. For example, our work in Bhutan, where we have been doing it for the last 5 years. So every year children get tested, there's a lot of systemic change happening, and then you track it and so on. Or the Gunotsav, currently with Gujarat we are doing a project called Gunotsav, which has been going on for the last 3 years with the Gujarat government. We have been involved for the last 1 year. So here we are looking again at how by focusing on learning outcomes one could look at improving the system. Or the school excellence program, which we are doing with the Mumbai Municipal Corporation. Again, there are about 6 partners in the study, and we are the assessment partner in that case. In terms of impact assessment studies, why I put it separately is that these could be typical baseline endline studies. You have a intervention maybe by an NGO, want to understand what is the impact of their intervention. So you have a baseline and then an endline model and so on. The Andhra Pradesh study is something which APF has been very closely involved with. That is something which falls between impact assessment, but it is also a longitudinal study because it was done for 6 years. It's supported by World Bank, Government of Andhra Pradesh, Asim Premji Foundation, EI and Harvard University. These were the partners. So year on year, same children, same schools were tracked. So not only learning outcomes was focused, but using learning outcomes, you also looked at impact of different interventions. So randomized trials were conducted to check whether teacher incentives work or input grants work and so on. So that would somewhat come in between. The purpose of me saying all these 3 different things is that all the type of the study actually determines the type of the assessment we will build. Each one would have to have a different design and different objectives. So for example, when we are talking of large-scale assessment, the first and foremost one needs to keep in mind is the objectives. So for example, it could be something where you are selecting the best. Like for example, the assessments we know for admissions or for appointments. These are assessments which are focused on the individual. Or it could be a large-scale assessment. Even a board exam you can say is a large scale, but it's for certification purpose. Or it could be something like a screening test where you want to check out whether in which level the child is forming. For example, now we have this out of school children and we have to mainstream them into the school system. But you really do not know at what level they will begin. So in such cases, when we design, it would be something like a screening test. Or if it is the purpose for diagnosis, like when you want to get a very detailed strength and weakness profile, you end up designing it differently. So to just give you an idea of when I say I'm selecting for the best, then my difficulty would be the level of even the difficulty would be different. Like for example, if it's an IITG exam or an entrance exam, etc., I would peg the test in a different way. Or if it's, for example, board exams are typically pegged at a lower difficulty level because the system wants the maximum number of people to pass through that gate. Uh, or if it's in the case of a screening, you would have multiple classes and multiple distributions overlapping, and then how you set the difficulty in such case. Whereas if it's for a diagnosis, which most of our large-scale assessment studies are falling in this pattern, it has to have a normal distribution where you're getting information about the low ability performers also as with the high ability performers and what they're able to do. Similarly, I would classify large-scale assessments where it is what we saw so far is the focused on the individual. So when you look at the design as it is and focused on the system, I would say again the assessments would differ in different ways. For example, the purpose of the assessment could be just to blow the whistle, just to tell the system things are not okay, things are not okay. So in that case you would want a quick and dirty snapshot, that could be done. Or it could be something where you want to give a very detailed, granular feedback where every child, every question, the teacher wants to have any, feedback on what is going well, what is not going well, etc. Then in which case you design it differently. Or it could be for, as I said, the baseline endline program impact is evaluated. In which case the design would be something where the endline could not be too different from the baseline. So you will have similar items, identical items, lot of other considerations needs to be kept in mind. Or it could be something where you have to generate benchmarks, in which case you need to figure out that the entire curriculum is covered, you have enough number of questions in a particular skill, and so on and so forth. So these are just pointers which says that how the objective of the test would determine how the assessment is in fact built.
So India does not really have two things. One is that if you look at the policy, the government policy has been such that since independence till even the most recent RT, they would be more focused on what we call as the inputs. We are interested in ensuring that all the inputs are satisfied and not really looking at whether children are learning or not. So as a result, you will have children going through years of education and then not being able to read or write and so on. So the focus of the policy should be, we are not saying that inputs are not important, but the focus, if it's on whether children are learning or not, whether there's an outcome or not, then the input sort of gets satisfied depending upon the outcomes, but the focus should be outcomes.
Some of the challenges which I would grade as system related challenges would be that when we design, we really do not know whether many times to base it on the textbook or on ground reality. So for example, when we started the work in Andhra Pradesh in 2004, and that was the first time EI started working in the government school system. So the textbook would be pitched at a particular level, the children will be at a different level. So what do you really go with? So do you go with this or that, and how do you ensure you get a normal distribution? Similarly, if when there could be also textbook inconsistencies. For example, in Uttarakhand textbooks, you will find that the numeral in maths would be they'll use an English numeral in some books, Hindi numeral in some books, and even there are different types of scripts they use. So when you're doing a standardized study where the paper would go right across Uttarakhand, you would not really, you have to take certain calls and then do some interviews and so on. So these could be some of the issues. And also there could be some unexpected differences across regions. For example, Gujarat curriculum, if you see, does not introduce geometry at all, which is there in all the rest of the states. So then how do you sort of account for it? And some of the complications we have seen is that how to base it on a particular language. For example, with some schools which we have worked in, affordable private schools in some of the areas like Andhra Pradesh and so on, you will find that the child in the classroom is taught about 4 to 5 languages. And when you communicate with the child, there may be an English medium school, but the child will be speaking in Hindi or in Urdu or in Telugu and so on. So then you really do not, and the teacher would also be communicating in this mixed language. So how do you really base the test? When it comes to design, as I said, what proportion should be written, what proportion should be oral. In fact, in the Andhra Pradesh project, initially when we did, we also had individual oral. So we had a written component, then we had a group oral component where the evaluator reads out and children answer and gather their information. And there was also a one-to-one individual interview. But then you have to take a call because the cost of an individual interview will be very high because an evaluator can at best test 5 to 6 kids for a period of 3 hours or 4 hours and so on, and whether that information is adding value to the information you already have and so on. So those types of decisions needs to be taken. And then higher order questions, this is something which we all know. Most of the papers do not have higher order questions. So introducing higher order questions and looking for conceptual learning.
I mean, if I go back the last 10 years, I would say that we have slowly moved away from so obsessively input focused to at least start talking about that quality of education, what children are learning is important. So even the RT says that quality of education is important, though it does not really say that how the quality would be monitored and how essentially you will check for whether children are learning specifically or not, which are the devil is in the details, of course. So I would say that this is one fundamental step. The second thing I would say, the large scale assessment thing that has helped the system is, the system has also started realizing that it is not enough if they just do an assessment where you're just measuring let us say Madhya Pradesh at this score compared to Tamil Nadu at this score, or Kerala at this score and so on. But what really matters is whether children are learning with understanding, and actually at the competency level, what is that the child is able to do, not able to do, and so on. So that that means transparency in tools, that means transparency in the test administration processes, standardization of test administration processes, and also analysis which goes beyond just averages and percentages, where there's a meaningful dialogue, where you're able to say that children at this score level actually are knowing this, are not able to do this, these are the types of misconceptions that children have, these are the common errors that children make, and these are the patterns of learning that exist in a district or in a state and so on. So which means transparency throughout the system, throughout the process of test conduction or the assessment, and also collecting data which is very, very granular. So making item level data available, making distractor level data available. So I think these are some of the learnings that slowly the system has had. So even if you look at the NCRT surveys, now slowly NCRT is also going into where they're starting to incorporate a few of these things, like for example the IRT, or the item analysis, etc., which educational initiatives have been talking about since, let us say, 2004 onwards.